Hey guys, how's everyone doing? This is the Sentinel, watching over Geekdom, and welcome back to Sentinel Reviews. It's time to close another chapter. I've reviewed Doctor Who Series 11 in its entirety, I've reviewed the Fourth Doctor Adventure Series 8, and now it's time to add the Jamie Trilogy to that list of completed stories as we look at the final chapter, Legend of the Cybermen, released in June of 2010, written by Mike Maddox, directed by Nicholas Briggs. Legend of the Cybermen stars Colin Baker as the Doctor, Fraser Hines as Jamie McCrimmon, and Wendy Padbury as Zoe Harriet. Also featured in this cast are Ian Gelder, Abigail Hollick, Steve Kinman, Charlie Ross, Alexander Siddig, and Nicholas Briggs as the Cybermen. As always, and I'm going to start right off the bat with this one, I will be talking spoilers. So if you haven't heard Legend of the Cybermen, it's your only chance to pause the video, look into buying it, because, Big Finish, and listening to it. So, first things first. That big twist I've been building up to, the one that I said as much as possible I've been trying to hold off talking about until this story. And now here it is. Much like the Fourth Doctor Adventures Series 8 being a kind of pseudo-sequel to the Daleks' Master Plan, the entire Jamie Trilogy is also a pseudo-sequel. This one is a pseudo-sequel to The Mind Robber, a really good second Doctor story. So, a quick rundown. In the Mind Robber, the second Doctor, Jamie and Zoe, find themselves in the land of fiction, as it's called, where the rules of reality have no meaning and are oftentimes inverted, and they find the land of fiction is monitored, ruled by a supercomputer overseen by a man called the Master. No, not that one. Although, ooh, that idea's got legs. But, so yeah, this entire trilogy of stories has been a sequel of sorts to The Mind Robber. The second the Doctor materialized in the Highlands in City of Spires, he has been in the land of fiction, which is explained how, the Red Caps have shown up, how legendary Scottish folk hero Rob Roy McGregor showed up, how the Doctor was involved in the events of The Wreck of the Titan, which, full disclosure, prior to this, I did not know was an actual book. How Captain Nemo showed up during the events of The Wreck of the Titan. Yeah, ever since City of Spires, the Doctor has been in the land of fiction. And I have no transition from that talking point to the next one. And one thing is, I really like the idea of Legend of the Cybermen, because the idea is, the premise alone is that the Cybermen have invaded the land of fiction, and when they realize where they are, they plot to get their hands on this supercomputer sort of monitoring the land of fiction and use it to alter perception and destroy imagination, destroy creativity. This is one of the most creative premises I have ever seen. This is one of the most, from that premise alone, this is one of the most creative Cybermen stories I've ever seen. It's not the best, but the idea alone is just really imaginative. Also, this being set in the land of fiction, it gives the story a chance for things to get really weird in the best possible way. It doesn't go as far as, say, Scherzo, or... yeah, Scherzo is the one coming to mind, but it still does get really out there. Some of the performances are a little over the top, like in particular Ian Gelder, who plays Count Dracula, because again, land of fiction, literary characters brought to life. But I feel because of the setting, because of this premise, and the fact this takes place in the land of fiction, and this is a literary character, I feel I can be more forgiving of those sort of over-the-top moments. So a little bit about the story. Much like in The Mind Robber, the Doctor and Jamie initially find themselves in a vast, empty white void. And after getting separated, the Doctor meets the Artful Dodger from Oliver Twist, and Jamie meets Zoe. Little bit of an info drop here. Because I forgot to mention this. After the events of the Mind Robber, the Doctor sort of defeated the Master, and he took him home. He took him back to his home after leaving the Land of Fiction. And in that gap between the Mind Robber and Legend and City of Spires, actually, a new sort of overseer has taken over the Land of Fiction, called the Mistress. And, you know, when she realizes what's going on, she tries to get the Doctor involved, and she recruits Zoe. Zoe was another Second Doctor companion, as I said, and she was also one of the Second Doctor's final companions, along with Jamie. When the Doctor regenerated in the War Games, Zoe was his last companion. And Jamie, but... And Fraser Hines and Wendy Padbury still have great chemistry. They still work together. Colin Baker and Wendy have good chemistry too, but it's not to the same degree that Fraser and Wendy have, and it's not to the same degree that Colin and Fraser have, but it is still good. You still do get that connection. And it kind of works too to its benefit, because Zoe does still have her memories of the Doctor. Jamie gets his too, and I'll get back to that. Trying to figure out where I want to go from there with the plot. So after escaping the Cybermen, leaving the Void, and getting into the Land of Fiction, the Doctor gets an idea of what's going on, and he kind of acts uncharacteristically cruel to Count Dracula. And I mean, I do kind of get where it's coming from, because in Doctor Who lore, there is a race of vampires, or vampiric creatures. Yeah, they're pretty much vampires. And they are ancient enemies of the Time Lords. But given that this is a fictional character and not a real vampire, it comes across as the Doctor being really cruel. And it's not bad per se, it's something I'm just mixed on. Like, I get where you're coming from, but he's not real. This story also has a surprising amount of humor in it, and most of it lands, and it doesn't feel out of place. I feel like it fits in really well. And now that I said that, I cannot think of specific moments. Okay, there is one. So, on their journey, because after meeting up with everyone, the Doctor, Jamie, and Zoe meet up with Alice Little from Alice in Wonderland, who is why did that take me so long to think of? Who is leading the fairy tale forces, for lack of a better term, against the Cybermen. And there is this one instance in the story where the Cybermen sort of hack into the supercomputer and try to alter everyone's perception, so that they find themselves in and narrating various different stories. Like, Alice finds herself in a lighthearted fantasy. Dracula finds himself in a gothic horror novel. Both these events are happening in tandem, and they're narrating them differently. It's a really good scene. Zoe finds herself in one of those children's read-along book type things. You know, when you hear this sound, it's time to turn the page. And Jamie, one of the best scenes in this story, Jamie finds himself in a Big Finish booth being directed by Nicholas Briggs. And when the Doctor rescues him, it's like, Jamie's pretty much freaking out. He's like, oh, Doctor, I was in this little box, they were making me say things, and the Doctor's like, it's a good thing I found you when I did, Jamie. You almost talked yourself into non-existence. You're in metafiction. That is so on the nose, but it's such a fun scene. Oh, what did I got there? Anyway, they continue the. Oh, there we go. That's one of the things I wanted to talk about. Because it helps transition into the next point. One of the things about this story is the scope is absolutely massive. Like, you talk about armies of Cybermen, armies of fairy tale creatures, all this fantasy stuff going around. Like, some things, when I listen to a Big Finish story, I like to think of it as like, oh, this would be cool to see on TV. Or this would be cool. No, not with Legend of the Cybermen. Legend of the Cybermen only work. If you were to try and visualize it, your mind would sort of think, this needs to be a movie. With a movie budget. And so, it is one of those things that work better on audio. And one of the other things that works really well here is cyber conversion. Now, some of the Cybermen stories I like best are the ones that address cyber conversion itself. And what a horrific experience it is switching out your organic parts for machinery. Spare Parts did this really good. World Enough in Time did it really good. Even the Cyber Invasion trilogy, The Harvest, The Reaping, and The Gathering, did it really well. And this one, we don't see so much of the cyber conversion. We just, again, see the aftermath. But the scenes are really vivid, like describing what these fairy tale creatures are going through when they're converted. Like, giants have all these scaffoldings just full of Cybermen in their arms, or Moby Dick has portholes drilled into him and he's been turned into an organic submarine. It's when you listen to a lot of the ways these fairy tale creatures have been converted, it's really horrific. And it also leads to another humorous moment. Dracula is in radio communication with the Doctor and Alice, and he's just like, the Cybermen they've converted mermaids. And Alice just responds, oh, that's just wrong. And trying to figure out where to go on from there. So, as they're on their way to the Mistress, not the cleanest transition, but it'll do, the Doctor and Jamie have a chance to seriously talk. No, I left out a point. We get one of the first big twists of this story in particular, is that we learn that the fairy tale characters, when they're wounded, they bleed ink. And that was what the Black Water was in City of Spires. That was ink that they were trying to get out of Scotland. And Captain Nemo was looking for squid ink for the same purpose in the Wreck of the Titan. And we learn why. The ink is important. It's a resource that they're using to create, that the Mistress, the new leader of the Land of Fiction, is using to create more fairy tale characters to fight the Cybermen. And we get one of the first big twists of this story. After a major fight with the Cybermen, we learn that Jamie has been cut by shrapnel and he is bleeding black blood. This older version of Jamie McCrimmon is not real. He is a fiction created by, the Land of Fiction. And then, so they're on their way to the Mistress. And we get this really great scene. Scenes like this have come up a couple times, like in School Reunion, between the 10th Doctor and Sarah Jane, or even in Death of the Doctor from the Sarah Jane Adventures, between the 11th Doctor and Joe Grant. This scene of, nothing was holding you back. Why did you never come back? And the Doctor doesn't have an answer. It's a really good scene with really great acting from both Fraser Hines and Colin Baker. Right away. So then we get to where the supercomputer and the Mistress is, and we get the second big twist. Zoe is also fictional, because a much older version of Zoe is the mistress of the land of fiction. Apparently, at the end of the War Games, after Zoe was returned to the wheel in space, several years later, it was once again beset by Cybermen. And while they were trying to convert her, I'm giving you the Cliff Notes version, by the way, her memories of her travels with the Doctor came back, so she tried to take the Cybermen to the land of fiction where they could do no damage. Which led into the situation we're in now. Which also has great moments because she said she tried to create fictional versions of the Doctor to fight the Cybermen, but not even not even the land of fiction could create a character like the Doctor. That does lead, and then this is perfect because we're getting near the end here, so it does lead into a point I have. The climax feels a little rushed. Like, it's not a bad climax, it just feels rushed, you know. Basically, Dracula has been captured and converted into a Cyberman, singular, but it doesn't fully work because cyber conversion only works on living tissue, and Dracula, being a vampire, is dead. And, you know, he's able to overpower the Cybermen with Captain Nemo and the Krakus, a character who showed up in The Mind Robber, long story. And they're able to upload a cybermat that they sort of converted, and it materialized, and the Cybermen rewrite their fiction and write themselves out of existence. I'm trying to figure out where I want to go from there. Ugh. And, well, I'm just summarizing the ending, but... And then they decide that Alice will become the new mistress of the land of fiction, and the Doctor takes Zoe home. And that ending itself is a real bittersweet moment. Like, it starts off with a narration by Alice becoming the mistress of the land of fiction, saying how Jamie seems to have disappeared fighting the last of the Cybermen, and then the narration switches to Zoe and her travel back to the wheel with the Doctor, and then it finally ends with the Doctor saying that as soon as they left the land of fiction, as soon as he took her back to the wheel, the blocks the Time Lords placed on her mind went back into place. And it's a really quiet, really somber moment. Anyway, as brief as that was my review of Legend of the Cybermen. A really great story. Probably the best story in the Jamie Trilogy. And I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10. Yeah, it did have some issues. But yeah, I'm giving it an 8 out of 10. But those were just my thoughts. What were your thoughts on Legend of the Cybermen? Please start a conversation in the comments below. Like, comment, subscribe. Click the little bell next to subscribe to get notifications when I upload. In the description box below, you will find the link to my Twitter, where you can follow me and get updates on the channel. Also in the description box below, you'll find the link to my Ko-fi, where if you like the content you see, you can support my channel. This is the Sentinel, watching over Geekdom, and I'll see you guys next time.